and I've recorded my new EP at Pachyderm Studios where Nirvana recorded In Utero. Dream come true. And I took meticulous notes on all the gear that was used. What we're going to do in this video is take a look at all the gear. Going to talk a little bit about the experience, what it's like to just work in the studio and stay at the residence on site, the preparation that I did in order to get there, which is really important. If you're at a phase where you think that you're past the demo phase and that you're ready to move on to the next stage, maybe go into the studio, make sure you stick around for the preparation phase. I'm also going to talk about mixing. I was really prepared to go in there and do tracking. I knocked out the tracking so quick that I was able to do mixing in the studio too. So all of that is coming in this video. But first, let's take a look at the grounds and do a tour of the studio. Cannon Falls is about an hour or so south of the Twin Cities, so it takes a bit to get here, but it feels super private. And when you come through the gates, you see the residence, and I love these elephant statues. We'll take a look a little bit more at the residence later. And then just down, like a long driveway, I guess you could call it, you will arrive at the studio pretty quickly. And then as we enter the studio, we come in first to kind of a kitchen area, and then that's a bathroom on the right, and up above is kind of drum storage in the loft. As we pass through to the studio, it's kind of a big loop. First we start off in this ISO room, which seems to be set up for guitar amps, which we didn't really use. This is the main room. You can see this is where my guitar stuff was set up. On the left there is the ISO booth with a lot of keyboards and stuff in there as well, but that's where we did vocals. Coming around this way, you can see one of those RCA77s on the ground here, the drum rig here, and then the bass right next to it. And the bass was plugged in through, as we kind of leave the live room, through the wall into the amp in here, which seems to be the kind of like bass amp ISO space. And then that loops back into the control room. And if we were to walk straight through here to the other side of the control room, what's now on our left, you can kind of see we'll go back to the kitchen and out, back outside to the residence. All right, so let's get into what you probably really want to see, which is the gear. Now, I should note that when I did this session, I wanted to use as much of their stuff as possible. So the only things that I brought with me were these things that are in green here. I'm a soul tone cymbals artist, so I brought my 14-inch Extreme hi-hat, my 22-inch Extreme Crash, which I use as a crash ride, my 12-inch Vintage Splash, and my DW5000 pedal. I should note that the 10-inch Splash is this tiny little cymbal, and it got this giant stand, which I thought was absolutely hilarious. Now, I like to play a very minimal kit in the studio. Even, you can probably see behind me here is my 4-piece that I usually play, but even in the studio, I usually pare it down to 3, just kick, floor tom, snare, and the cymbals. Told them what type of music I wanted to play. I said, tell me what kind of drums to use, and they gave me a 60s Leedy 20-inch kick, a pork pie 16-inch floor tom, and a 70s Superphonic snare. I should note also that I took meticulous notes on what was used, so on the next page in just a couple moments we'll go through all of the mics that were used as well. My basic rhythm sound was this 1965 Gibson ES 330. It was awesome to play this thing. It was like a piece of history, but it didn't have strap buttons on it, so I had to play sitting down, and I never play sitting down. So it was super weird to play sitting down, and for one song, I actually play the 330 through the Crybaby wah into the Vox AC30, and it was so weird to use like the wah pedal while sitting down, but it was still just amazing to be able to play that instrument. So that was the kind of the core sound for the whole album, was this 330 into an AC30, two of them hard pan left and right. That was the rhythm sound for the entire album, and for one song the wah was used. And then my clean tone was a 64 Fender Jaguar. For the clean tone was plugged into a Roland JC 120 directly. I should mention that the 120 was so good. When it was turned on, I actually said, oh my Lord, that sounds so good. And then eventually, a couple weeks after my session there, I went and I bought that Roland JC40 right there. So yeah, the clean tone was the Fender Jaguar into the 120. My lead tone was that Fender Jaguar, again, plugged into that Marshall that you see behind it. There's an old school Plexi thing. It had seen some years. I also, before that, is the Maestro Fuzz. I wanted to use the Maestro pedal because I'm a huge fan of the Beastie Boys, and I love their song, The Maestro, which was named after a different Maestro pedal, but I still wanted to use this one. And then for the bass, I used this 64 P bass into an Ampeg B15M. And it was also, you can kind of see in the back there, we're also getting a direct line for both of those. And yeah, so that was all of the instruments that I used. It was just guitar, bass, and drums for this particular, well, and some percussion and vocals. Now the mics are pretty interesting. So for the vocals, there was this one Giants AKG C12, this guy, which sounded absolutely incredible. It was in the ISO booth. It was really cool to see the Shure SM57 and the Sennheiser RE20 both used. The 57 was on snare top, and on both the AC30 and the 120, you can see there's a Royer 121 on each of those. And then the bass amp, we just took a look at that, but I'll bring that back up. That was mic'd up with an AKG D20E. And then way back, in the back of the room, there's a mic stand in kind of the middle, and there's a mic all the way at the very top of it, and that's that AKG C24. And then there were two RCA 70s that were kind of lower in the room, and or 77s, I'm sorry. Two of these lower in the room. They were pretty far back from the drums, probably about 8 feet back, and about 2.5, 3 feet off the ground. These were just some gorgeous mics. The Sennheiser 441 on the snare bottom. The hi-hats had a Telefunken M280 on them. There were two Coles 4038s over the drum kit as overheads, and the kick drum was pretty amazing. It had this RE20 on the in, which was really cool just to see an RE20 continue to be used. And there was an RCA 44 just outside of it. And it's kind of hard to explain how big this mic is. You get an idea of it here in front of the kick drum. But yeah, the kick out was this massive RCA 44. It's an absolutely gorgeous microphone. I don't know how else to put it. And then the floor tom had an AKG 414 EB. Now, I went into Pachyderm expecting to just track the music, but was able to get into mixing and leave there with some final mixes that I sent straight to masters. And I want to point out that, again, that was because of how I prepared. I'm going to get into that after I talk about mixing, because mixing was a joy to do there. Not only was it the first time I was able to perform and record with that quality of equipment, but also to have someone run the mixing in a way that they know how all that equipment is already behaving was really interesting. There were a couple times when it wasn't the decision that I had in mind, or it's not the decision that I think I was going towards, but it always ended up in a great place. I also was able to just kind of communicate, hey, I want to try this thing. Nick would be like, okay, let's see how we can do that. In fact, one time I was being a little bit timid, and I was like, I don't want to assume that we can do this. And he was like, hey, whatever it is that you want to do, assume that you can do it, and we'll figure out a way to make that sound happen. There was another song on there that's an a cappella song, and it was just kind of missing something after day 2. So as I was walking down from the residence to the studio that morning, the birds are everywhere and they're chirping, and I was like, that should be the background sound. So I was like, hey, can we just stick a mic in the door and record some of that, the ambience, I should say, of the yard and the creek and everything? And he was like, sure. And put that in there, and it finalized the track. So that kind of stuff was really cool. In specific, there's a beginning of one of the songs where I wanted it to fade in. It's kind of moving from one key into another. What I wanted to do was have each, while it was fading in, each instrument would go from fully modulated to not modulated at all. And this was that exchange and how that worked out in the studio. So, like the basic idea is that for like each instrument, like I said, it would have its own modulation. The mix will go from 100 to 0. You know, so like fully flanged to no flange at all.
On and off, or you want it to be a slow fade back into normal?
Slow fade into normal.
Okay.
Can you bring that back up? Can we, like, how far can we push that?
I have like the rooms and overheads on one, and the kick and snare and toms on another.
Oh yeah, do the same thing with 2 different modulations on each of those. Like one on the kick and snare and toms, and one on the metal and room. That sounds awesome. Or it should sound awesome. If it doesn't, we'll dial it back. You see, pretty crazy. I dig it so far.
That one's called Kick Drum Madness.
Let's see. What?
I love the little paint. You want to see if lowering the frequency makes it
Along with the studio itself, you get the use of the residency here. This is where I've been staying. Last night I couldn't sleep, and in this hangout room, there's some instruments that are just kind of laying around. It's an electric guitar that only has 5 strings on it. The electronics don't work in it. A bass, and this drum was actually like a decoration that was up on the shelf. But I had some fun with it, and I recorded a song last night, single mic, straight into my laptop. I was even playing the drum here with some colored pencils because I didn't have any drumsticks. Now, I didn't take a lot of pictures while I was in the residence, but I did shoot some video. So these are some of the sitting spots where I shot those videos. I had a lovely view for my breakfast every morning. And just check out this groovy carpet. So I went into Pachyderm expecting fully to just track the songs, but I was so prepared that I got the tracking done so quick that we get into mixing, and I was able to get so much more out of the session than I was originally planning. I did a lot of my homework before I showed up, right? Nick, who runs the studio, said, hey, I've never seen anybody be this prepared before. And also when I was talking to my buddy Broke Boland, who runs Aerotone Productions, a studio in which I've recorded in Pennsylvania a bunch of times, I told him how I prepared, and he was like, you got to tell other people about this. This sounds great. The first thing was finding tempos for each of the songs, and I found the exact tempos. It only took a couple minutes to do, and what I did is I just kind of played the riff and kind of kept that pulse going, used a BPM detector on my phone. It gave me the BPMs. I recorded the drum part, I recorded the bass part, recorded the guitar part over it, and sang just like a minute or something. How does that feel? A little bit fast, a little bit slower? Is that perfect? Not is it good enough, but is it perfect, right? And I landed on some BPMs I would have never. I'm going to read through them: 131, 103, 146, 163, and 82. I probably would have stuck with 85, 165, 145, 100. The next thing was avoiding using a click track. Now, I still used a click, but what I prefer to do is use a shaker. I saw in some video or read somewhere a long time ago that people will play much more naturally if they're playing to a shaker rather than a click. So I turned on a click. I thought about the song. I played through the song in my head while I got the shaker going, count myself in, and I played through the song with the shaker and the click going at the same time, which is important in the studio. We had the click and the shaker both going at the same time. Once I got those reference tracks together, I put them in a folder. This is what I brought into the studio with me. I have a session files folder here, which are the files I got from them as I was leaving the session. Video is the video that I captured while there. You saw some of it here. And I also have my practices in here. We'll talk about that in a second. But this references folder holds all of those MP3s. So if I hit play on one of these, you'll hear I'll say, this is the name of the song, this is the BPM, I'll count in, and then I'll count in a jam. I'll talk about that in a second. But check this out. Lobster Tank, 146 BPM. Jam, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So what I'm doing there is something where I give myself an opportunity to feel the pulse of the beat of the song, also with the shaker, and then I give myself 8 to 16 bars of jamming through the main riff before I stop and recount in for the actual recording. I talked about red light fever before, right? When the record button is blinking, it's easier to screw up. But even when you do well, sometimes the end of the song feels better than the beginning because I haven't quite locked into the pulse, especially on earlier takes. And I like to take as few takes as possible. So each of these have that jam at the beginning, and then they go through the shaker for 8 to 16 bars of a jam, and I'll shake it out, 1, 2, and then count back in for the actual beginning of the song. But what I also did was I used those references and I tried to record each day for a week before I went in. I wasn't able to get a full 7 in. I got 5 in. On day 1, I was just setting up the DAW. This is when Tape 16 first came out. It really was like kind of old school, running along with tape and no undo and stuff. So on these first 3 are the entire EP played from beginning to end to those shaker reference tracks. These last 2 days, I also added a click. I also believe on the first day, I don't think I sang. I think I was just getting through the instruments. I've lined up all of my practices on the 13th through the 18th, and then the studio mix is below. If I hit play, they're going to line up anywhere. I just have 2 songs here, but let's hear one. And this is the studio mix, and this is my very first demo. Yeah, no vocals on that, but we can hear 2 days later. Sounds pretty hollow, but I'm just trying to get through the last day. It sounded a little bit better. I'm just trying to get through the forms of each of the songs kind of perfectly, and eventually. So by the time I got to the studio, I was really solid at playing these songs all the way from beginning to end. And you can hear on some of them, I'm experimenting with different shakers here, different harmonies. One time, I dropped something on my foot. I think I dropped a Coke bottle on my foot, and I went, ah, and it was kind of in key. Right when the vocals, the other version of me that sings says berserk. It's like, it could drive you berserk, and I hear, ah, and I was like, oh, I'm keeping that. The iterations and the steps of going through this made it possible for me when I got to the studio to just hit record and go. And I recorded all the instruments on day 1. Day 2, I just did vocals and shakers in the morning, and then moved on to mixing. It's also really important to get to know the studio itself and their equipment. I went through their equipment list on the website, so I knew what equipment was available. Kind of chose the songs that would work best with that. I tried to kind of match the tones that I thought I was going to get in my demo recordings. I also noticed in the other videos of people recording there, they're all wearing socks, which means it's a no shoes studio, which is totally cool. I prefer to play standing up and wearing shoes, especially if I'm going to use pedals. So I brought my slippers with me, and I kept them only indoors while I was there. Little things like that make a difference. That's a loud goose. All right, so as we wrap this up, I want to make sure that I address what it's like to work at Pachyderm Studio in general, not just the gear and the residents. You get to work with all that equipment, but a huge part of the experience is also working with a professional who knows all that equipment, has worked with tons of other artists, and sometimes can anticipate what's going to happen. A great story is I woke up on the second day, and my allergies had been so horrible. I barely slept the night before. I could barely breathe. I was like, I'm not going to be able to sing today. And he was like, oh, we keep some allergy meds around for this, found it for me, and I was singing an hour and a half later, feeling a lot better. You can get red light fever when you're tracking. Sometimes when the red light is blinking, it's a little bit scary, and you tend to screw up a little bit. Instead of saying like rolling, okay, here we go, take 3 or something like that, he would say, here it comes. And it was a lot more inviting. I could tell that was a device that he has developed from countless hours of working with artists in that space. So yeah, there are intangibles that allow an experience like that to become more than it was expected to be. I mean, I thought I was going to go in there and just be tracking, and I left there with a bunch of mixes that I was ready to use. So yeah, it was a dream come true. If you want to check out the tunes, I'll roll out of here with the first single, How the River Flows. That's live right now. Full EP is going to be out soon. Appreciate it if you check that out. And if you got any other questions or something, feel free to leave them in the comments, and I will see you around. Cheers. Yeah.